100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction
42/20. I am pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Rubenstein. You have the floor, sir.
I just need to confirm that you can hear me and see me.
We are now seeing you.
Okay, perfect. And you can hear me, of course. Thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulty on my end. Well, good morning. As introduced, my name is Martin Rubenstein, and I'm the chair of the Board of External Auditors. In addition to myself, I'd like to introduce the rest of the board, Ms. Carmen Castro and Mr. Dean Evanson, who are the other members. Ms. Castro is the Associate Comptroller General of the U.S. Department of State, and Mr. Evanson is the Director of Audit at the Audit Office for the Government of Antigua and Barbuda. On behalf of both my colleagues, I am pleased to present the board's annual reports on the external audits of the accounts and financial statements of the OAS and its related entities. Our report is submitted in accordance with Article 130, which requires that the board submit its report to the Permanent Council. Technically, we were supposed to provide this report within 4 months of the fiscal year end of the OAS. However, due to the pandemic, we have been delayed. Having said that, I'd like to stress that the audited financial statements were provided to OAS lenders on time as required by banking and debt covenants. On that note, I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the fact that we are all working in very uncertain times. The impact of COVID-19 has spanned across the world and as a result, organizations have had to adapt in these unprecedented times. The OAS is no different. We'd like to acknowledge the efforts that the OAS has made in managing during these challenging times. The pandemic has shined a light on the dedication of each member and employee of the OAS, and this spirit has been demonstrated in the resiliency and the commitment to maximizing its contribution. I also wanted to mention that I think it's always important to reiterate what the board's role is in the context of presenting this report. In carrying out our responsibilities, we have the following objectives. We need to address OAS reports and recommendations that will contribute to greater efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in the conduct of the organization's affairs. We promote the continued developments of accounting and financial reporting procedures. We ensure the conduct of all external audit operations in such a way as to fully discharge the board's assigned responsibilities. And we ensure the performance of the Inspector General and the audit function in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Before I get into some of our key findings, I just wanted to, on behalf of the board, thank the Secretary General, the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, and the Secretariat of Administration and Finance for all their assistance in providing open and honest information to the board. Without this, we would not be able to carry out our mandate. We had excellent discussions with the Permanent Council Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs. It is apparent to the board that their leadership on matters of administrative governance and accountability is having a positive impact on the operations of the OAS. As always, the year-end audit takes time and effort by all, especially under the circumstances. We wish to thank the OAS for its assistance. It's important to note that we received full access to all information, even during these challenging times, and we acknowledge the full cooperation extended to the board by all levels of the organization. Again, thank you. A few findings that we think are very important to raise in the context of this presentation. In our discussions with the external auditors, BDO, they've issued an unmodified opinion on all financial statements of the OAS for the year, and they were released on April 30th, 2020. It's important to note that this is a significant accomplishment once again for the organization. BDO's responsibility is to provide reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements. They did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls this year that are considered to be material, so of significance. They did, however, identify one control deficiency which they considered to be significant. The deficiency was with respect to the organization's liquidity issues of the reserve fund. Due to the nature of the deficiency, BDO felt that it was important to bring this attention to the OAS, and the board would agree. The board would also like to highlight that while the majority of recommendations from BDO's report in 2008 have been responded to, one does remain outstanding, and this recommendation relates to the formulation of revenue recognition procedures for the Trust of the Americas. Both of these issues have been communicated to appropriate officials within the OAS, and the board suggests that actions be taken to address these issues. One of the objectives of the board is to contribute to greater efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of the affairs of the OAS. In doing so, the board acknowledges that the COVID-19 pandemic has and will continue to have an impact on the operations of the OAS. The board realizes that all member states have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and will most likely continue to be impacted well into 2021. Notwithstanding this impact and uncertainty on all member states, not just the OAS, it is the board's responsibility to provide observations and recommendations to strengthen the sustainability of the OAS. And while the pandemic will exacerbate certain of the ongoing operational issues of the OAS, the board will continue to highlight the systemic aspects of these issues. The board would like to recognize that the measures taken by the OAS to manage through the pandemic have been extraordinary, pivoting programs to deal with both situations respectfully, but effectively as well. We wanted to acknowledge that the OAS continues to make significant progress in modernizing its procedures and systems. During the year, member states approved two significant undertakings: a resolution to come up with a new comprehensive strategic plan and to establish a regulatory budgetary framework inclusive of processes and practices, which will be used to review budget implications of any new mandate. The board feels that these two initiatives are significant steps forward for the OAS in managing its priorities and operations. To manage this, the OAS has implemented, I apologize. Historically, the OAS has operated with too many mandates and not enough financial resources to effectively and efficiently implement them all. The context of these two new plans and frameworks will be important to assisting the organization in its modernization and sustainability efforts. The board is hopeful that this new comprehensive strategic plan will not only prioritize mandates, but will also address the ongoing budgetary imbalances that have impacted operations. In addition, enabling sub-strategies related to human resources, real property, ICR fund, business process modernization, and enterprise resource planning will be pivotal in ensuring the long-term sustainability of the organization and will be most likely pillars within these strategic plans. Notwithstanding the uncertainty resulting from the current pandemic, the board does remain concerned with the organization's liquidity because the day-to-day cash flow requirements of the OAS have only been met by way of short-term borrowing from the Treasury Fund. These cash flow deficiencies are due largely to the fact that some member states do not pay their quotas in a timely manner. The OAS anticipates that several temporary loans will be required during the fourth quarter of 2020 to cash manage salary and operations. The OAS has further projected that there are enough funds within the Treasury Fund to cash manage their operating expenses until the end of 2021, although this assumes that all countries pay quotas on a timely basis. Notwithstanding, this continues to be a concern of the board, as this short-term cash management strategy is not sustainable into the medium term. The board must also stress the fact that the budgetary imbalance, as previously identified, also has a direct impact on the cash flow issues of the OAS. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to wish everyone the very best during these uncertain times. Please take care and remain safe. With that, I will conclude my presentation and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you and your team, Mr. Rubenstein, for your very well-documented report. I now offer the floor to delegations. The delegation of Venezuela, Venezuela has the floor.
Disculpe, señora Presidente, no, la solicitud era solamente para dejar constancia de mi presencia. Mil excusas.
I was not clear on what happened with Venezuela.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. He was just requesting the floor to constitute quorum. And
Okay.
it was during the presentation by
Okay.
Mr. Rubenstein. The other
Oh.
speakers on the list follow.
Okay, thank you. We'll now acknowledge the delegation of Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Oh, I'm sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be on. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Let me start this morning, of course, by saying hello to everybody, but also very much welcoming the 2019 report of the Board of External Auditors, and to thank the external auditors for their very good work over the course of the past year. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that were mentioned this morning. And let me start with one that's very much on our minds. Canada is very concerned about the financial situation that is currently facing the Organization of American States, particularly as it concerns its regular fund deficit. As I think colleagues know, difficult adjustments have been made to the budget ceiling and ensuing cuts that all member states are being forced to make in order to compensate for an extraordinarily high level of delinquency in payment of assessed contributions of a few, and it's a situation which we think is very unfortunate. We regret the stress that non-payment is placing on other member states, on the organization, and on its staff. And for our part, would urge those who are in arrears to establish payment plans in order to help the organization with its forward planning. Aussi, Madame la Présidente, deux autres choses. Le Canada souscrit pleinement aux recommandations du Conseil des vérificateurs externes selon que l'OEA poursuive ses efforts pour reconstituer le fonds de réserve dans le but d'atteindre les seuils requis dans les normes générales. Nous convenons, en outre, que l'organisation doit prendre soigneusement en considération l'effet de la pandémie actuelle et les défis financiers qu'elle pourrait présenter pour ces opérations à l'avenir. Enfin, le Canada soutient les objectifs généraux que le Conseil de vérification a adoptés pour guider ces opérations, car ils contribueront à une plus grande efficacité, efficience et économie dans la conduite des affaires de l'organisation. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
We thank the delegation of Canada and now recognize the delegation of Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Em primeiro lugar, quero cumprimentar todos os colegas participantes da reunião, a presidente do Conselho e o secretário-geral adjunto. Antes de entrar em matéria sobre o relatório da Junta de Auditores Externos, eu quero dizer que tomamos boa nota dos comentários feitos há poucos minutos pelo representante permanente do Canadá, muito embora não possamos compartilhar dos termos exatos em que eles foram feitos, porque nos parecem que excedem, enfim, os termos normais de referência a esse assunto. Presidente, minha delegação toma nota e agradece a apresentação do relatório da Junta de Auditores Externos referente ao ano de 2019. Como de costume, a Junta identifica de maneira eficaz os desafios administrativos e financeiros enfrentados pela organização, desde a necessidade de fortalecer a reserva do fundo regular e de bem definir a finalidade dos fundos de recuperação de custos indiretos, até a conveniência de estabelecer uma estratégia de recursos humanos efetiva e de avançar na priorização dos mandatos. Embora nem sempre coincida integralmente com as opiniões da Junta, o Brasil compartilha suas preocupações e se mantém engajado na busca de soluções para as questões incluídas no relatório que acabamos de receber. Eu quero aproveitar a oportunidade também para manifestar o apreço pelo trabalho dos órgãos de controle da OEA, dentre os quais se insere a Junta de Auditores Externos. E como reconhecimento da importância das atividades dessas entidades, o Brasil busca conferir-lhes prioridade na elaboração dos orçamentos da organização e ativamente contribuir para o aprimoramento das suas funções. Nesse sentido, seguimos acompanhando com particular interesse o mandato para que seja instaurada uma comissão de auditoria permanente e independente, o que, tal como aponta o relatório, contribuiria para fortalecer a autonomia dos órgãos de controle interno. Entendemos que essa comissão poderia promover de maneira eficaz o contato entre os Estados-membros e os auditores externos e também favorecer o recebimento mais tempestivo de relatórios sobre os temas administrativos que eventualmente constem da ordem do dia da Comissão de Assuntos Administrativos e Orçamentários e também deste Conselho Permanente. São esses meus comentários. Muito obrigado, presidente.
We thank the delegation of Brazil and now recognize the delegation of the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States wishes to thank the board for the report and to express our appreciation and our support for the Board of External Auditors. We are, of course, particularly grateful and proud of the contribution of Ms. Carmen Castro, who serves on the board in addition to her duties as Associate Comptroller for the Department of State. External audit boards play a vital role with respect to the conduct of international organizations. As we all know, financial decisions and prudent financial management are of paramount importance, especially in the challenging budget environment we're confronting. This organization benefits from the careful work of the board, which seeks to bring forth more efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in the affairs of the OAS. Given the global pandemic, we know this year presented extra challenges in the completion of your duties. So we want to commend the board for its resilience. The United States will continue to advocate for the respect and independence of the Board of External Auditors and the other oversight and supervisory bodies of the OAS. We look forward to working with other member state delegations to ensure implementation of the board's recommendations. Thank you very much.
States. And there being no further, we now recognize the delegation of Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Buenos días a todas y todos. Para felicitar a la Junta por su excelente trabajo, por sus responsables recomendaciones y hacer un exhorto a todos los Estados miembros a tomarlas muy en consideración. La situación financiera de nuestra organización es muy difícil y debemos tomarla muy en consideración. Haber fijado un techo presupuestal en 79 millones y haber conservado el techo global presupuestal en 84.9 millones nos lleva a la responsabilidad de no tener que gastar más de los recursos con los que contamos, para que no entremos en una situación crítica de imposibilidad de sostenernos financieramente. Creo que las recomendaciones de la Junta deben de ser seriamente tomadas en cuenta y hacer un esfuerzo por cumplirlas todos los Estados miembros. Tenemos una situación crítica en nuestros países, en el caso particular de México, con una profunda austeridad republicana viviendo desde el gobierno. Si esa situación es así ahora, podríamos pensar que el año que entra pudiéramos tener todos los estados mayores dificultades en poder cumplir con nuestras responsabilidades. Dado que la mayoría de nuestros recursos están destinados al pago de la nómina de los trabajadores de la organización en todas sus modalidades, resulta muy importante, debe de ser de alta responsabilidad tenerlo en consideración, porque eso tiene que ver con el pago de la nómina. Quisiéramos hacer un exhorto a tomar con mucha seriedad y no como un asunto más de los tantos que escuchamos en la organización, las observaciones, sugerencias del informe presentado hoy. Como ustedes saben, el haber fijado estos techos en esas cantidades implicará que la cuota anual de todos nosotros se incremente el año que entra. Ojalá y podamos honrarlo, este incremento pagando nuestras cuotas por el bien de la organización. Muchas gracias y gracias de nuevo, felicitaciones a la presentación de la Junta. Muchas gracias.
The delegation of Mexico, and there being no further requests for the floor, we again thank the chair and the board for this good report, and I suggest that the Permanent Council take note of the report by the chairman of the Board of External Auditors of the OAS, Mr. Martin Rubenstein, contained in document CP/Doc 5642/20 and transmitted to the General Assembly with observations and recommendations made by member states. There be no objections, it is so agreed. We'll now move to item 3 on the agenda. The next item in the order of business refers to the consideration of the draft resolution, priority role of the Organization of American States in the development of telecommunications, information and communication technologies through the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission, which was presented by the permanent missions of Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and the United States, and is included in document CP/Doc 5640/20. I offer the floor to delegations wishing to refer to this draft resolution. We now recognize the delegation of Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. La Argentina, en su calidad de presidente del Comité Directivo de la COMCITEL y en nombre de las delegaciones de Colombia, Estados Unidos y México, presentó el proyecto de resolución El papel prioritario de la Organización de los Estados Americanos en el desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones, tecnologías de la información y la comunicación a través de la Comisión Interamericana de Telecomunicaciones ITEL. El presente proyecto tiene como objetivo central destacar el rol clave de las telecomunicaciones y las tecnologías de la información. Asimismo, subraya la labor de la Comisión Interamericana de Telecomunicaciones CITEL como entidad especializada de la OEA en esta materia. Al igual que en los años anteriores, el proyecto de resolución alienta a los Estados miembros con el apoyo de la Secretaría Ejecutiva de la CITEL a profundizar la cooperación horizontal y el intercambio de buenas prácticas y experiencias en el campo de las telecomunicaciones. Paralelamente, impulsa a los Estados miembros de la región a avanzar en la conectividad y el acceso a banda ancha como motor fundamental del desarrollo sostenible. Señora Presidenta, este año se puso de manifiesto que la infraestructura de las telecomunicaciones es un insumo fundamental e indispensable para las economías nacionales y para compensar los impactos negativos generados por la pandemia de COVID-19 en la inclusión económica y social, el acceso a servicios, la igualdad de género, el acceso a la educación y potencialmente el acceso al empleo. Las herramientas y el conocimiento de las telecomunicaciones y las tecnologías de la información y la comunicación han permitido que la respuesta de nuestros países a los desafíos planteados por el COVID-19 sea más efectiva y decisiva. La CITEL constituye una estructura regional que salvaguarda las tecnologías de la información y las telecomunicaciones en las Américas. Y aprovecho la oportunidad para agradecer a su Secretaría Ejecutiva por el acompañamiento a los Estados miembros. Hoy las telecomunicaciones constituyen un instrumento eficiente para facilitar el acceso de todos a la información y a la educación, para posibilitar la libertad de expresión, componentes esenciales en la promoción de la democracia, la defensa de los derechos humanos, la garantía de la seguridad y el fomento del desarrollo integral y la prosperidad de la región. Señora Presidente, mi delegación, en coordinación con otros miembros de la CONCITEL, abrimos un espacio de negociación informal en el que se intercambiaron comentarios a fin de consensuar el texto que se ha presentado para la consideración de este Consejo Permanente y su posterior remisión a la Asamblea General. Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
We thank the delegation of Argentina and now recognize the delegation of Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eu queria, por favor, solicitar, além de agradecer à delegação da Argentina pela apresentação do projeto, queria solicitar, por favor, ao secretariado que tome nota da decisão do governo brasileiro de copatrocinar este projeto também, juntamente aos demais. Por favor, muito obrigado pela atenção.
We thank the delegation of Brazil and now recognize the delegation of Panama.
Muy buenos días, Presidenta, Secretario General Adjunto. Quería solicitar también de manera respetuosa y al tiempo de agradecer a Argentina por la presentación del proyecto, que nos sumamos también al copatrocinio de esta resolución. Gracias.
We thank the delegation of Panama. And there be no further requests for the floor. The chair proposes that the Prominent Council agrees upon a draft resolution, including the changes already recorded by the Secretariat. This draft resolution will be sent to the plenary of the General Assembly for its consideration. There be no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. We now move to item 4 on the agenda. This next item in the order of business refers to the consideration of the draft resolution towards an Inter-American Business Charter, which was presented by the Prominent Mission of Colombia and is included in document CP/Doc 5641/20. I offer the floor to the delegation of Colombia and other delegations wishing to refer to this draft resolution. Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidente. Quiero agradecer la inclusión de este punto en la agenda del día de esta reunión del Consejo Permanente e iniciar por solicitar la elevación a la Asamblea General del proyecto de resolución hacia una Carta Empresarial Interamericana para su consideración y aprobación en el 50º periodo de sesiones. También quiero agradecer a todas las delegaciones que participaron activamente en las reuniones convocadas por la Misión de Colombia, por todo su apoyo y valiosas contribuciones, las cuales nos permiten presentar el día de hoy un documento acordado y el cual cumple con el objetivo que tiene mi país al presentar esta resolución: crear el mandato para que en el seno de la organización se pueda discutir la creación de un instrumento que nos permita impulsar a la empresa privada como actor fundamental del desarrollo de la región. Colombia está convencida de que una Carta Interamericana Empresarial es un instrumento fundamental, más en los tiempos que nos encontramos atravesando. La Carta cobra mayor relevancia en el contexto de la recuperación económica una vez el COVID-19 haya sido superado y el sector privado va a ser una de las piedras angulares en ello. La intención de la Carta Empresarial como iniciativa del presidente Iván Duque es apalancar al sector privado e involucrarlo en iniciativas de desarrollo de la región, teniendo en cuenta la importancia que tiene como generador de empleo y como actor fundamental en la creación de riqueza y prosperidad de los países. Estamos convencidos de que el desarrollo y la democracia son los dos principios que se necesitan y se complementan. No se puede pensar en que exista uno sin el otro, pues son aspectos esenciales que aparecen en la Carta de la Organización de los Estados Americanos e incluso se reproducen en la Carta Democrática Interamericana, donde se reconoce que en la lucha por la eliminación de la pobreza, los esfuerzos relacionados con la empresa privada, la innovación y la infraestructura son el motor del desarrollo. Allí se potencian los equilibrios macroeconómicos y la cohesión social, la integración internacional y la creación de empleo e inversión privada, la promoción de pequeñas y medianas empresas, el fomento de la propiedad privada y la estabilidad jurídica para las empresas. Creemos en involucrar profundamente a las empresas privadas en el desarrollo de nuestros países como actores fundamentales en la creación de empleos, como motores de innovación y pilares para la reducción de la desigualdad desde la base de una responsabilidad empresarial. Esto, señora Presidente, nos permitirá a su vez avanzar en la protección de los derechos humanos y nos conducirá a tener una región más segura y democrática. Es de igual importancia recordar que Colombia considera que este no es un documento que busque fijar posición política o jurídica controversial. Al contrario, es un documento que se enmarca en lo que ha sido la estructura para la construcción del sistema interamericano. En este sentido, no buscamos que sea un tratado de comercio, porque para eso existen los órganos competentes. Lo que buscamos es una participación más activa en el marco de la responsabilidad y del apoyo que desde el sector privado se puede dar en un involucramiento más activo y participativo en los procesos de desarrollo de la región, que son intereses generales para los estados. Teniendo en cuenta esto, lo que se pretende es lograr una Carta Interamericana que siga la misma estructura y que tenga el mismo nivel de compromisos políticos de la Carta Democrática Interamericana y de la Carta Social de las Américas. Finalmente, me permito reiterar a todas las delegaciones mis más profundos agradecimientos y los de mi país por el apoyo ofrecido con generosidad en el proceso de negociación del proyecto de resolución que hoy presentamos. De igual forma, quiero invitar desde ya a todas las delegaciones a que participemos activamente para que la organización pueda contar con un instrumento que no tenemos duda será de gran utilidad para nuestros países y nos permitirá avanzar en el desarrollo de la región. Gracias, señora Presidente.
We thank the delegation of Colombia and now recognize the delegation of Venezuela.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Muy brevemente para decir que la delegación de Venezuela agradece a la misión de Colombia la iniciativa tomada y quisiera formular nuestra intención de copatrocinar este proyecto de resolución. Muchas gracias.
Thank the delegation of Venezuela and now recognize the delegation of the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States would like to thank Colombia for its tireless efforts to introduce this topic at the OAS General Assembly. As a strong supporter of the OAS's entrepreneurship initiatives, we welcome the opportunity to highlight the critical importance of the private sector in achieving sustainable development. We believe this initiative will provide an opportunity for OAS member states to consider policies and measures that can help to create an environment in which business can seamlessly access global markets, reduce risks, grow, and create jobs. The initiative will also provide us with an opportunity to listen to and to take seriously the recommendations of business associations and civil society groups on how to break down barriers to innovation and entrepreneurship. Thank you again to the government of Colombia, and we look forward to working with you all to promote private sector development and its role in driving innovation, generating prosperity, and fostering inclusive and competitive economies across the region. Thank you very much.
We thank the delegation of the United States. And there being no further requests for the floor, the chair proposes that the prominent council agrees upon a draft resolution, and any changes already recorded by the Secretariat. The chair recognizes the delegation of Bolivia. You have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Bolivia también se suma a los agradecimientos a la iniciativa de Colombia. Consideramos que el desarrollo del sector productivo privado, en armonía con las políticas estatales, es clave para el desarrollo de los países y el desarrollo social conjunto. También alentamos y sostenemos una política fuerte de hacer competitivos nuestros sectores productivos en el marco de las iniciativas privadas e innovación constante del sector. Así que expresamos manifiestamente y expresamente todo nuestro respaldo a Colombia. Muchas gracias.
We thank the delegation of Bolivia. And there being no further requests from the floor, the chair proposes that the prominent council agrees upon a draft resolution. This draft resolution will be sent to the plenary of the General Assembly for its consideration. There being no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. We will now move to item 5. And this next item in the order of business refers to the consideration of the draft resolution advancing the hemispheric response to climate change in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was presented by the prominent missions of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago through document CP/INF 8773/20. I offer the floor to delegations wishing to refer to this draft resolution. We now recognize the delegation of Barbados.
Madam Chair and delegates, good morning. It is certainly my honor on behalf of Barbados, the delegations of CARICOM, as well as the countries and the jurisdictions of Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama to introduce this draft resolution for the consideration of the 50th regular session of the General Assembly of the OAS. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed the smallness and fragility of our global community. This pandemic is an existential threat to which we have all borne witness, whose damning effects have upended lives all across the world, and whose economic toll is still being quantified. The current displacement of livelihoods in this new reality is a dark preview of the existential threat of climate change. Barbados is firmly of the view that we cannot contemplate a return to normalcy while a climate crisis looms over our long-term recovery. Barbados is well aware that it is not alone in this thinking. 22 member states have joined us in our call to escalate climate action in this hemisphere and to bring the weight of this organization to bear on the international community to support this effort. This year, climate-centered texts appear in draft resolutions on food and security, integral development, multidimensional security, and human rights. This is evidence that the Americas as a whole has also done a serious reckoning of the impacts of climate change across the 4 pillars of this organization. While the pandemic will erase 9% of Latin America and the Caribbean's GDP this year alone, the Inter-American Development Bank and its research has shown that economic losses in the region will be many times greater by the year 2050 due to climate change on its own. As this region's chief political convener, the OAS was made for a moment like this, and we must act now to ensure that our region's recovery from this crisis is one that is both durable and sustainable. Through 4 rounds of informal negotiations, robust debates grounded in good faith, and flexibility by all member states, Barbados can now present a consensus text that conveys the will of the entire region of the Americas. This resolution does not redraft international agreements nor coin new terms. Instead, it draws on the scholarship of IFIs and others to make its case for sustainable, low-emission, and climate-resilient recovery in the wake of COVID-19. It encourages climate-specific dialogue between member states, permanent observers, and external donors to attract funding, technology, and support for projects that benefit all member states at this critical time in our development. It is testimony to the merit of this draft resolution that the overwhelming majority of delegations intervened to strengthen, not weaken, its level of ambition. At a time when divisiveness has too often defined our talks, our works on this text remind us of the true spirit of the Americas, of camaraderie, mutual respect, and a common purpose. Barbados is humbled and grateful, and we are excited by the cooperation possibilities that these mandates will now introduce. Barbados gives each member state our commitment that we will follow through on the implementation of this resolution and continue the spirit of cooperation that we forged during these negotiations. Chair, I end as I began by thanking all member states who worked with Barbados on this text and reiterating our deepest appreciation to delegations of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, the Bahamas, Belize, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Grenada, Guyana, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Nicaragua, Panama, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago for their co-sponsorship and continued endorsement of our works. I'm obliged to you, ma'am. Thank you.
We thank the delegation of Barbados and now recognize the delegation of Chile.
I don't see Chile, Madam Chair, in the list.
Chile, the delegation of Chile has the floor. Is it?
Madam Chair, I have USA and Nicaragua in the list.
We now recognize the delegation of the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ambassador Lynch. As you know, this resolution is a difficult one for the United States. That said, we thank delegations for their flexibility during negotiations, and we appreciate the delegation of Barbados as chair sought to forge consensus on these complex issues. The United States has concerns about this resolution's intent to create a nexus between climate issues and the COVID-19 pandemic. We offered edits throughout the negotiations to reflect that these matters should not be conflated. We will issue a footnote to the entire resolution, underscoring that references to climate change and/or the Paris Agreement are without prejudice to U.S. positions. The United States reiterates that it submitted formal notification of its withdrawal from the Paris Agreement to the United Nations on November 4th, 2019. The withdrawal will take effect 1 year from the delivery of the notification, that is on November 4th, 2020. In closing, the United States continues to support the OAS's work on resilience, specifically in areas where the OAS meaningfully adds value. On the specific issue of climate change, we may have to agree to disagree with our friends. We strongly oppose conflating conversations on resilience with issues that are best addressed in other international forums. Thank you very much.
We thank the delegation of the United States and now recognize the delegation of Nicaragua.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Quiero agradecer enormemente al embajador Lynch por todo el esfuerzo, igualmente como país copatrocinador de esta importante resolución, la apoyamos plenamente y creemos de que es un buen esfuerzo y sobre todo refleja de que aún hay esperanza en la organización para atender las cosas que realmente debemos de atender como países. Obviamente hay un nexo entre el cambio climático y lo que tiene que ver precisamente con la actual pandemia y futuras pandemias que se puedan desarrollar en la medida que nosotros sigamos atentando en contra de la naturaleza y nuestro ecosistema. Obviamente la naturaleza va a seguir respondiendo y adecuándose a ese tipo de afectaciones que nosotros hacemos como seres humanos. No me queda más entonces que agradecer al embajador Lynch por este esfuerzo y esperamos entonces tener una buena resolución, sobre todo que rompe con el elemento monotemático que tenemos acá en la Organización de los Estados Americanos. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
We thank the delegation of Nicaragua. And there be no further requests for the floor. The chair proposes that the Permanent Council agrees upon a draft resolution, including the footnote of the delegation of the United States and or any other changes already recorded by the Secretariat. This draft resolution will be sent to the plenary of the General Assembly for its consideration. There be no objections.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, Barbados is requesting the floor.
Okay. Barbados is recognized. You have the floor.
My apologies, ma'am. That was done in error, but that was done in error. My apologies. Thank you.
There be no objections. It is so agreed. Agreed. We now move to item 6 on the agenda. The following agenda item refers to the report on the 2019-2020 activities of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, CD, to the General Assembly, which was published as document CD Doc 297/20, revision 1, and includes the draft resolutions entitled Advancing Hemispheric Initiatives on Integral Development, CD Doc 298/20, revision 1, and the challenges to food security and nutrition in the Americas in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic under the framework of the Plan of Action of Guatemala 2019, CD Doc 299/2020. I'd like to offer the floor to the chair of CD, the permanent representative of Haiti, Ambassador Leon Charles. Ambassador Charles, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour à tous nos collègues. Madame la Présidente, j'ai le plaisir de m'adresser au Conseil permanent en ma qualité de président du Conseil interaméricain pour le développement intégré et de vous informer que le rapport annuel du CD a été approuvé par les États membres pour transmission à l'Assemblée générale. Le rapport couvre la période 2019-2020 et fait la chronique des activités du Conseil, de ses organes subsidiaires et de celles du secrétariat exécutif pour le développement intégré. Le rapport décrit également certains des nombreux succès enregistrés par le secrétariat pour le développement intégré, en particulier de la manière dont il a pu répondre aux besoins des États membres à la suite de la pandémie COVID-19. En réponse au Covid, le CEDI a déployé une approche en 3 volets pour soutenir les États membres, a ajusté son portefeuille de projets existants pour aider les États membres dans leurs efforts de réponse au Covid-19. Il a exploré de nouveaux projets qui ont pu être rapidement mis en œuvre et il a renforcé sa portée auprès des partenaires multisectoriels pour compléter ses efforts. Madame la Présidente, nous ne saurions trop insister sur le fait que CEDI a entrepris un travail remarquable pendant une période très difficile. Je peux affirmer avec certitude que chaque État membre a bénéficié des travaux du secrétariat au cours de l'année écoulée. Madame la Présidente, je suis heureux d'annoncer que le CEDI s'est réengagé à travailler en collaboration avec les États membres sur la question spécifique du renforcement de la résilience alors que nous travaillons pour nous remettre de cette pandémie mortelle. À cet effet, au cours des derniers mois, le CEDI s'est concentré sur une compréhension plus approfondie du renforcement de la résilience et a spécifiquement jeté les bases de la construction d'une coopération et de partenariat pour le renforcement de la résilience entre les États membres. En mettant l'accent sur les opportunités de participation publique et privée et l'investissement dans le renforcement de la résilience économique, sociale et environnementale. Madame la Présidente, j'ai également le plaisir de vous informer que 2 résolutions seront soumises par le CEDI à l'Assemblée générale. La résolution intitulée « Faire progresser les initiatives continentales en matière de développement intégré ». Document CEDI/CPD/doc.298/20. Deuxièmement, la résolution intitulée « Les défis de la sécurité alimentaire et de la nutrition dans les Amériques dans le contexte de la pandémie du Covid-19 dans le cadre du plan d'action du Guatemala 2019 », présenté par la délégation du Guatemala et coparrainé par les délégations de la Barbade, Bolivie, Brésil, Chili, Costa Rica, République dominicaine, Équateur, Salvador, Haïti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexique, Panama, Paraguay, Pérou et Venezuela. Document CEDI/CPD/doc.201/20. Je remercie les membres des divers organes subsidiaires du CEDI, de l'Agence interaméricaine de coopération et de développement et des comités interaméricains pour leur leadership au cours de l'année. Merci à toutes les délégations présentes dans cette salle pour votre contribution au dialogue, pour votre participation aux réunions et pour l'engagement de vos gouvernements dans les travaux du CEDI. Enfin, Madame la Présidente, ma délégation exprime sa gratitude à la secrétaire exécutive Kim Osborne pour son leadership solide, aux directeurs et au personnel du secrétariat pour leur dévouement et leur travail acharné. Et les félicite pour les programmes et activités qui ont vraiment un impact sur la vie et les moyens de subsistance des habitants de notre hémisphère. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
We appreciate the presentation of CEDI and your report. As reported by Ambassador Charles, the draft resolution promoting hemispheric initiatives in the area of integral development and the draft resolution, the challenges to food security and nutrition in the Americas in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic under the framework of the Plan of Action of Guatemala 2019 were both agreed by CEDI at the meeting held on October 15, 2020. I now offer the floor to delegations for any additional comment. The delegation of Guatemala is recognized. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidente. Permítame expresar el agradecimiento de Guatemala por el acompañamiento y apoyo que brindó la Presidencia del Consejo Interamericano para el Desarrollo Integral, la Presidenta de la Comisión de Políticas del CEDI
y en particular a los Estados miembros por su trabajo dedicado y comprometido con la búsqueda de un texto de consenso que nos ha permitido llegar a este día importante en el cual estamos presentando ante este Consejo, en seguimiento a lo hecho por el señor presidente del CIDI, el proyecto de resolución, los desafíos para la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional en las Américas frente a la pandemia del COVID-19 en el marco del Plan de Acción de Guatemala 2019. Mi delegación agradece a los estados que copatrocinan esta resolución. Son 18 estados, señora presidenta, los que se han sumado a todos los demás estados de la región para impulsar esta iniciativa, señora presidenta, que es de todos ahora. Señor presidente, tanto Guatemala como los demás países aquí presentes hemos reiterado en este y en otros foros la enorme preocupación que nos une por los efectos que ha tenido y seguirá teniendo el COVID-19 y los efectos que está causando de varios retrocesos en la región, ocasionando graves repercusiones en el incremento de la pobreza extrema, la desigualdad y el hambre en nuestro hemisferio. Los países de la región no podemos ser indiferentes. Por ello, Guatemala, junto a varios países de la OEA, hemos promovido varias acciones para que se prioricen en este foro temas tan importantes para nuestros contextos como la seguridad alimentaria, el combate de la pobreza y la pobreza extrema, la educación, la inclusión laboral y el fortalecimiento de las políticas de protección social. Además, en el ámbito de la OEA, nuestros países han liderado importantes avances en la región interamericana, como la adopción de la Declaración Interamericana de Prioridades en materia de desarrollo social, equidad e inclusión social, superando la pobreza multidimensional y cerrando las brechas de equidad social hacia una agenda interamericana de desarrollo social adoptada durante la cuarta reunión de ministros y altas autoridades de desarrollo social en la OEA en Guatemala en el 2019. Asimismo, la adopción por primera vez en el ámbito de desarrollo social en la OEA del Plan de Acción de Guatemala, superando la pobreza multidimensional y cerrando las brechas de equidad social hacia una agenda interamericana de desarrollo social en el 2019, constituye una hoja de ruta con acciones concretas para que nuestros estados logren avanzar en objetivos tan esenciales para la región como la erradicación de la pobreza en todas sus dimensiones, el fortalecimiento de los sistemas de protección social y cooperación hemisférica para promover el desarrollo social en las Américas. Todos aspiramos a alcanzar la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional para nuestras poblaciones y para lograrlo debemos trabajar juntos sin perder de vista nunca a los más vulnerables. Es por esto que esta resolución abarca temas importantes para todos los Estados miembros de esta organización, los cuales incluyen la atención a la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional de nuestras poblaciones, especialmente las más vulnerables, la importancia del comercio de alimentos, la agricultura familiar, la inocuidad alimentaria, la ubicación geográfica y las condiciones climáticas, entre otros. Para concluir, señora Presidente, Guatemala destaca la importancia del trabajo que vienen realizando las organizaciones del sistema interamericano y de las Naciones Unidas especializadas en la materia que abordan esta temática. En ese sentido, consideramos importante que la OEA continúe siendo una plataforma de diálogo político para compartir mejores prácticas, fomentar alianzas, promover y facilitar cooperación técnica, así como impulsar la generación de proyectos con una perspectiva de desarrollo y de derechos humanos que puedan aportar a la superación de la inseguridad alimentaria y la desnutrición en las Américas. Nuevamente, nuestro sincero agradecimiento a todos los países que prestaron su copatrocinio: Barbados, Belice, Bolivia, Brasil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Haití, Honduras, Nicaragua, México, Panamá, Paraguay, Perú, República Dominicana y Venezuela, y a todos los Estados miembros que hicieron suyo este proyecto de resolución. Agradecemos sinceramente el apoyo de la Secretaría de Acceso a Derechos y Equidad y a la Secretaría Técnica del CIDI y especialmente a la secretaria Kim Osborne. Gracias, señora presidenta.
We thank the delegation of Guatemala for your intervention. And there are no more requests for the floor. There be no more requests for the floor. The chair of the Permanent Council suggests submitting to the General Assembly the 2 draft resolutions presented by the chair of CD. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. The chair also proposes that the Permanent Council take note of the CD annual report, as well as the observations and recommendations of the delegations, which will proceed to forward to the General Assembly in compliance with the provisions of Article 91.F of the Charter of the organization. If there are no objections, we'll proceed in this way. Agreed. We will now move to item 7 on the agenda. Let us recognize, before doing so, the delegation of the United States.
Chair, it's to present item 7.
Oh, it's item.
Can I present item 7? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'll introduce you to present item 7.
Thank you.
One moment. The following item refers to the report of the 2019-2020 activities of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, CAP, to the General Assembly, and includes a draft resolution entitled Program Budget of the Organization 2021. I would like to offer the floor to the Chair of CAP, the Permanent Representative of the United States, Ambassador Carlos Trujillo. Ambassador Trujillo, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to see you. In my capacity as Chair of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, it is my pleasure to present for consideration by the Permanent Council a summary of tasks accomplished with a view to reviewing and approving the program budget for 2021. The CAP held 10 formal meetings and 18 informal meetings to analyze and deliberate on business matters, including the proposed program budget, the draft resolution text, and the work being carried out by the corresponding working groups. The written report contains all the details in regards to the activities and topics considered during this period, many of which have been subject of discussions and decisions at this level. So I will concentrate on reporting the recent activities of the CAP during the negotiations of the program budget. The CAP initiated the consideration of the 2021 budget ceiling at the first meeting held in February. Due to the pandemic circumstances, did not allow the CAP to finalize these deliberations at the beginning of the year. Once they were able to continue the work virtually, the CAP resumed its activities. During the negotiations, some delegations expressed concerns over the amount of quota arrears and its impact on the Treasury Fund, as well as the possibility of some countries being unable to pay their quotas this year due to the pandemic. Several delegations insisted that the organization should consider spending cuts and take austerity measures, like many member states have done and continue to do. The fact that the large contributors will be reduced this quota percentage places greater responsibility on the rest of the member states with respect to timely quotas. At the meeting held on August 21st, 2020, delegations agreed to a compromise proposal establishing a ceiling of $79 million. The CAP then requested the General Secretary to prepare a draft program budget for member states. At a meeting on September 15th, the CAP received a presentation of the proposed budget by the Secretariat. After deliberations and based on the comments from delegations, the CAP instructed the General Secretariat to present the following: a revised proposed budget that did not involve the use of any reserved subfunds, spread the cuts across the chapters, and allocate the full amount of resources required to be allocated under Chapter 4. In compliance with the request for the CAP, the Chief of Staff of the Secretary General on September 28th presented 2 budget scenarios that met these conditions. At this meeting, the CAP also agreed to the Chair's proposed methodology for the analysis and negotiation of this budget. At the request of the committee, the Secretariat for Administration and Finance presented on October 2nd, 2020, the templates reflecting the impact of both scenarios by chapter and specialized organ. Thereafter, delegations were asked to submit comments and any proposals to adjust ICR funding for a particular chapter or organs of oversight bodies and chapters. The CAP intensely engaged in an informal consultation and meeting. An informal study group of 6 countries reviewed these proposals, prioritizing them, and then presented to the CAP their recommendations for adjustment. This revised material was distributed to member states. Consensus was reached as the agreed budgetary allocations are mainly focused at the chapter level. The resolution instructed the General Secretary to submit a draft sub-program distribution of resources no later than November 3rd, 2020. Then the CAP will consider it and submit it to the Council for final approval before November 18th. It is also worth noting that delegations have included a list of priority areas that they want to see reflected in the allocation of resources by sub-program. Madam Chair, I'm pleased to present the Permanent Council the draft resolution program budget of the organization for 2021. This agreement would not have been possible without the flexibility and compromise of all delegations. All member states are seeing cuts to their priorities as a result of the budget, but we are all understanding the sacrifice we must make to preserve the functioning of the organization while also taking into consideration the financial challenges facing member states. As I conclude this report on the work of the CAP in preparation for the 50th regular session of the General Assembly, I wish to express my gratitude to my fellow ambassadors and delegations of all missions for their contribution, participation, and dedication throughout this process. In particular, I would like to take an opportunity to thank my vice chairs, Ambassador Elisa Ruiz Diaz and Ambassador Maria Lorena Sol de Pul, the chairs of the working group, Estela Quiriolo de Tialdi from Uruguay, who has left the OAS, Henry Pfeiffer from Brazil, Zaida Ponturas, Werner Ruiz from Peru, also vice chairs of these groups, Carolina Vera from Paraguay, Carolina Schlesinger from Colombia, and Felipe Aravena from Chile. I thank you all for all your professionalism and work to support the committee. Finally, I would like to thank the Secretary for Administration and Finance, Secretary Charles Grover, Javier Arnaiz, and Oscar Javera, and Dr. Ruben Farge of the Department of Legal Services for their professionalism and work. But lastly, but not least, I would like to give my deepest gratitude to the committee secretariat, Ileana Navarro, for all her tireless efforts in supporting our work. That is our report, Madam Chair.
Ambassador Trujillo, thanks for presenting the report of the activities out of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs and the draft resolution. Dear colleagues, as was mentioned by the Chair of CAP, we have in front of us a draft resolution that was agreed to in the framework of discussions carried out in this committee. I now offer the floor to delegations for any additional comment. The delegation of Brazil is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gostaria de felicitar o embaixador Carlos Trujillo, representante permanente dos Estados Unidos da América, e os vice-presidentes da CAP pela liderança que mostraram durante o processo de negociação do Orçamento Programa 2021, para o qual o Brasil teve também a satisfação de contribuir. Congratulamos também todas as delegações que trabalharam mais proximamente para que fosse possível alcançar consenso em torno do orçamento do próximo ano, em condições que nós sabemos que são desafiadoras em razão da pandemia do Covid-19. Reconhecemos que a conjuntura do próximo ano será mais difícil do que a experimentada pela organização no atual exercício fiscal, mas estamos certos de que o orçamento-programa que acordamos hoje representa o equilíbrio possível para que a organização tenha condições de manter-se atuante e para que seja capaz de cumprir plenamente os mandatos que os Estados-membros decidirem aprovar para 2021. Muito obrigado, senhora presidente, pela atenção.
We thank the delegation of Brazil for your intervention. There be no more. We recognize the late request of Canada for the floor.
I know, Madam Chair, a late request. I'm clearly technologically challenged these days, so my regrets, but I am here, and I really wanted to take an opportunity to thank very much Ambassador Trujillo for his leadership at the CAP and the tireless efforts of his delegation, his team, namely Christina Burf and Ben Barron. They've worked very hard on this over the last while, and also to commend both Brazil and Peru for their work as chairs of the resolution and technical working groups, and of course the Secretariat, as Ambassador Trujillo mentioned, for all of its contributions and assistance. The CAP would not run without the support of Ileana Navarro, and I'd like to particularly thank her and highlight her excellent work. As colleagues have mentioned, this was a uniquely difficult budget to allocate, given that the adjustments that were required to the budget ceiling. We're very thankful for the work and flexibility of all member states that have enabled us to deliver a consensus budget. Efforts were made to spread the pain as equitably as possible, and we have made every effort to empower secretaries to manage these cuts. Canada recognizes that the path ahead will not be easy, but we pledge to continue to work with the Secretariat and with fellow member states to support the OAS. Thank you.
The request for the floor. The Chair of the Permanent Council suggests submitting to the General Assembly the draft resolutions presented by the Chair of CAP, program budget of the organization for 2021. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. Are we recognize the delegation of Honduras? Are you requesting to speak on this item?
Embajador Cordero, si podría hacer refresh de su browser, porque no está entrando en pantalla.
Ahora sí. Buenos días. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. La delegación de Honduras reconoce los trabajos realizados por el embajador Carlos Trujillo, presidente de la Comisión de Asuntos Administrativos y Presupuestarios, así como el de las vicepresidencias y de los grupos de trabajo, por concluir de manera satisfactoria las deliberaciones del presupuesto de la organización para el año 2021. Asimismo, aprovechamos para reconocer a la Secretaría General por parte del proceso de deliberación. Honduras valora de manera especial el esfuerzo realizado por todos los Estados miembros durante todo el proceso de preparación y deliberación para acordar un presupuesto realista y consistente con el impacto económico con la pandemia del COVID-19 y que nos obliga a todos a lograr esos consensos en materia de recortes presupuestarios que seguramente no quisimos hacer. Si bien el proceso de estabilización económica en la región ha comenzado ahora mismo, el mismo sigue siendo lento y frágil, lo que seguramente hará que el proceso de recuperación sea más largo de lo esperado, haciendo que este ejercicio de consolidación presupuestaria sea una gran oportunidad para buscar eficiencias en costos, que sean permanentes y que permitan a la organización afrontar los retos que este nuevo normal nos plantea. Reiteramos nuestro compromiso desde la Delegación de Honduras para seguir colaborando con el trabajo de esta comisión. Muchísimas gracias.
We thank the delegation of Honduras and now recognize the delegation of Nicaragua.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Muy brevemente, solamente para reconocer la encomiable labor realizada por el embajador Carlos Trujillo al frente de la CAP, al igual que las vicepresidencias y los representantes en los diferentes grupos de trabajo. Creemos de que en esta etapa difícil del COVID-19, obviamente la situación financiera se vuelve un poco más estresante. Sin embargo, queremos reconocer ese valioso esfuerzo realizado por el embajador Trujillo y su equipo. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
We thank the delegation of Nicaragua. There be no further requests for the floor. We have now concluded consideration of the 2019-2020 report on the activities of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, and I thus propose that we take note of the presentations made by the CAP Chair, as well as the interventions made by delegations. There be no objection, it is so agreed. Agreed. I remind delegations that the following two items have been included in the agenda for this regular meeting for consideration by the Permanent Council, acting as a preparatory committee of the General Assembly, pursuant to Article 91C of the Charter of the Organization of American States. Item 8. This next item in the order of business is the consideration of the note by the Secretary General requesting to include a brief presentation by the President of the Inter-American Development Bank during the 50th General Session of the General Assembly. This note was distributed to delegations as document AG/CP Doc 979/20. In that sense, I ask delegations if they agree to update the draft schedule of the 50th regular session of the General Assembly to include a brief presentation by the President of the IADB right after the presentations that are already included by the organs and organisms of the OAS. If there are no comments, it is considered agreed. Agreed. I request the Secretary to update the General Assembly draft schedule accordingly and distribute it to delegations. Item 9. This next item in the order of business is a note by the Permanent Mission of the Dominican Republic requesting to discuss the modality of the order of the interventions of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs. This note was distributed to delegations as document AG/CP Doc 980/20. I will now offer the floor to the permanent representative of the Dominican Republic regarding this note. Dominican Republic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Sí, la República Dominicana muy respetuosamente desea solicitar que revisemos las consideraciones que se sometieron la semana pasada como recomendaciones para el procedimiento de la próxima Asamblea General, en virtud de que luego de un diálogo con la mayoría de las delegaciones, hemos entendido que sería prudente establecer un orden de precedencia para los oradores que van a participar de la sesión plenaria la semana próxima. En ese sentido, pues nosotros tenemos a bien sugerir que adoptemos el orden de precedencia en orden alfabético de acuerdo a la elección que se hizo por sorteo en el mes de marzo durante la sesión de aquel momento. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
We thank the delegation of the Dominican Republic and now recognize the delegation of El Salvador.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Buenos días a todos. Queremos secundar la propuesta hecha por el distinguido embajador de la República Dominicana. Nos parece una propuesta muy lógica, muy correcta, que nos puede ayudar mucho en esta próxima Asamblea General. Muchas gracias.
We thank the delegation of El Salvador and now recognize the delegation of Chile.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Nosotros también creemos que la propuesta que ha sido formulada por el embajador de la República Dominicana es muy lógica. Yo creo que ella, ¿no es cierto?, ordena y permite, ¿no es cierto?, una mayor seguridad, ¿no?, para el importante, ¿no es cierto?, debate de los ministros de Relaciones Exteriores. Por lo tanto, nosotros plenamente apoyamos la propuesta de República Dominicana. Muchas gracias.
We thank the delegation of Chile and now recognize the delegation of Mexico.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Solamente para expresar que México apoya la solicitud de la delegación de la República Dominicana. Gracias.
We thank the delegation of Mexico and now recognize the delegation of Panama.
Panamá también quiere sumarse al apoyo de la propuesta de República Dominicana, no solo porque nos permite organizarnos en nuestras cancillerías de mejor forma para la agenda de nuestros cancilleres, sino también creo que facilita la propia operación de la Secretaría General Adjunta en cuanto, por ejemplo, al tema tecnológico, a los mensajes pregrabados y etcétera. Así que realmente vemos muy positiva esta propuesta. Gracias, Presidenta.
We thank the delegation of Panama and now recognize the delegation of Ecuador.
Gracias, señora Presidenta. Igual que las delegaciones anteriores, el Ecuador también considera y apoya la propuesta de la República Dominicana, que ciertamente facilita la celebración de las deliberaciones, en particular de los jefes de delegación, de los cancilleres. Y obviamente este es un pedido y una aceptación de propuesta para esta asamblea. No creo que corresponda ni convenga, al menos en este momento, sentar un precedente, pero sí para esta ocasión, dado que es la primera vez que entramos en un proceso virtual de Asamblea General y para facilitar los trabajos, me parece una muy oportuna propuesta y la apoyamos. Muchas gracias.
We thank the delegation of Ecuador and now recognize the delegation of Guatemala.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. En primer lugar, para agradecer al embajador de República Dominicana, Josué Fialo, por esta muy cuidadosa iniciativa, tomando en consideración, como han dicho mis antecesores en el uso de la palabra, que es la primera asamblea en modalidad virtual, y lo que queremos es, como él ha indicado, un mejor y mayor aprovechamiento del tiempo y asegurar la organización de la sesión plenaria. Entonces, Guatemala plenamente y agradece la propuesta y la apoya. Gracias.
We thank the delegation of Guatemala and now recognize the delegation of Uruguay.
Muy bien, gracias, presidenta. De verdad, completamente de acuerdo con la propuesta que se acaba de realizar. Es absolutamente organizada, nos permite una metodología de trabajo para poder prever los tiempos, horarios, cargas horarias de todos y cada uno de nosotros. Y bueno, realmente yo diría que es un salto positivo para poder trabajar de manera organizada y metodológicamente adecuada. Así que estamos muy congratulados de llevar adelante y aprobar la iniciativa. Adelante.
We thank the delegation of Uruguay and now recognize the delegation of Barbados.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, we would wish to thank the delegation of the Dominican Republic for considering this proposal and bringing this to the fore of our meeting. We believe that this system will allow delegations in a virtual setting to be better prepared to present at the General Assembly, taking into account that many of our ministries of foreign affairs are going to be pressed into dealing with, obviously, with embassies and missions in a remote setting. We think that this brings more certainty to the process and allows us to be overall to be better prepared. So we endorse this particular action. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
We thank the delegation of Barbados and now recognize the delegation of Honduras.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Al igual que las delegaciones que me antecedieron, quiero sumarme a la propuesta presentada por el embajador de la República Dominicana. Me parece que esta propuesta nos permitirá establecer mucho mejor nuestras agendas. Muchas gracias.
We thank the delegation of Honduras and now recognize the delegation of Venezuela.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Simplemente, señora Presidente, para respaldar la propuesta que acaba de ser formulada por la delegación de la República Dominicana, en el entendido de que es una contribución a una mejor realización de la Asamblea, dadas las condiciones de virtualidad en que la vamos a desarrollar, y le permite a los ministros de Relaciones Exteriores tener un mejor manejo de sus respectivas agendas. Gracias, señora Presidenta.
We thank the delegation of Venezuela and now recognize the delegation of Canada.
Much, Madam Chair. Like others before us, we'd like to thank the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic for bringing forward this very constructive proposal, and it's one that we also support.
We thank the delegation of Canada and now recognize the delegation of Peru.
Presidenta, gracias. Buen día a usted y a todos los representantes ante la OEA. Totalmente de acuerdo con esta iniciativa planteada por República Dominicana. Sin embargo, creo que se hace necesario una puntualización. A la fecha no se tiene confirmada la participación de todos los señores cancilleres. Y tal como está mostrándonos el formato de hoy, primero hablan todos los representantes y luego los observadores. Yo también creo que se debe entender que se debe priorizar a los cancilleres que participan. Es decir, si una delegación acredita a su canciller, obviamente está en un primer espacio. Aquellas representaciones que no han acreditado a su canciller entran en un segundo espacio. Con esto, obviamente, le vamos a dar la prestancia que un evento de esta magnitud exige, que es una asamblea una vez al año. Y a efecto de ello, yo dejo asentada esta observación que espero pueda ser asumida. Gracias.
There are no further requests for the floor. I see there is a consensus to establish a modality of the order of the interventions of ministers of foreign affairs or heads of delegation. We note also the recommendation of the delegation of Peru to be taken into consideration, so that the procedure that we'll follow is as proposed by the Dominican Republic, but taking the recommendations made in consideration. If there are no more comments, it is so agreed. Agreed. I request the Secretary to update accordingly the draft recommendations on procedure for the 50th regular session of the General Assembly, document AG/CP/Doc 976/20, revision 2, and distributed to delegations. I thank the delegation of the Dominican Republic for requesting the inclusion of this item in today's order of business. The next item on the agenda is item 10, and this next item refers to the establishment of the Style Committee for the 50th regular session of the General Assembly, as provided for in Article 28 of the General Assembly Rules of Procedure. I quote, the prominent council of the organization shall constitute a Style Committee composed of delegations appointed at the last regular meeting. At the last regular meeting it holds before each regular or special session of the General Assembly, and each such delegation shall represent one of the 4 official languages of the organization. The Style Committee shall receive the resolutions, declarations, and recommendations issued by the General Assembly, shall correct their defects of form, and shall ensure equivalency among the versions of the official languages. If it knows defects in the form that it cannot correct, the Style Committee shall submit the matter to the Permanent Council for resolution. The Chair proposes that the Style Committee include the following delegations: Brazil for Portuguese, Canada for French, United States for English, and Colombia for Spanish. This Permanent Council is reminded that meetings of the Style Committee will be open to the participation of all delegations. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. We now move to the last item on the agenda, item 11, other matters. So the final item on the agenda for this meeting refers to other business. Regarding the designation of the scrutineers for the elections that will take place during the General Assembly, I request the good offices of the Assistant Secretary General to identify and choose them among delegates, taking into account regional and gender diversity. I now offer the floor to delegations that wish to bring to the attention of this Council any other informative matters. I'll now recognize our Assistant Secretary General. Ambassador Mendes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the matter of the scrutineers that will help the Secretariat undertake the management of the elections next week for the General Assembly, I am very pleased to inform and thank the delegation of Colombia that has already submitted a name of one of the persons who will help us to be a scrutineer. We thank them very much. We hope that we will get 2 other volunteers very, very soon, because we need to do the necessary training with them and the walkthrough with them of the premises. If you allow me also, Madam Chair, I would like to make a couple of announcements regarding the planning for the upcoming General Assembly. There are 16 delegations, 16, that have still not submitted their letters of accreditation, nor any indication of who will be allowed into the plenary session or who will be allowed into the General Committee. We also have our first event on Monday morning, the permanent observers. I really would like to request those delegations that have not done so as yet to please submit your letters of accreditation indicating who will be attending, especially the plenary sessions and the General Committee. We have the first event on Monday morning with the permanent observers, and the way it's planned, 5 members per delegation will be allowed entry into the room just for the management of space purposes. So we would also appreciate if you could indicate to us which one of those 5 will be allowed on Monday. This is for the dialogue. Remember, this is not a formal part of the General Assembly. This is the dialogue with the observers. We hope to get an indication from the delegations as well. This evening, we have additional technical trials. We have our technical staff on standby for any delegation who still wishes to do an additional technical trial to connect either from Capital or from the mission. We have our technicians on standby just to make sure that everybody has the capacity and does the trial before the beginning of the activities next week. That's it for now, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, SG. We now recognize the delegation of Chile. Chile, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Yo quisiera solamente hacer una pregunta al secretario general adjunto por lo último que él se ha referido en cuanto al tema, ¿no es cierto?, de estos eventos paralelos anteriores a la Asamblea General. Primero, entendemos que estos eventos son eventos paralelos anteriores y que no forman parte de la Asamblea General. Y por tanto, tienen una modalidad de acceso diferente a lo que es la Asamblea, y tanto la plenaria como la Comisión General. Por eso yo quisiera clarificar. Serían, entonces, habría que señalar 5 personas para todos los eventos paralelos anteriores, los del día lunes, que habría que enviar los nombres, y cuándo sería proveído las plataformas de acceso para dichos eventos. Muchas gracias.
Okay. We sign the delegation for Chile and now recognize, give the floor to Assistant Secretary General for clarification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have the General Assembly starting on Monday. Well, I'm sorry, on Tuesday. On Monday, we have the events prior to the General Assembly that are not part of the General Assembly. We have mentioned to delegations before that in terms of the management of space in the General Assembly, we will have 2 rooms, the plenary session and the General Committee. In the plenary session, we will have space for 5 delegates from each of the delegations. In the General Committee, we will have space for 10 delegates from each one of the delegations. We would like to receive from those delegations that have not done so as yet the names and the email addresses of the 5 delegates who will go into the plenary session and the 5 who will go into the General Committee. We're also asking an indication of the 5 persons who will be participating in the dialogue with the observers on Monday and in the dialogue with civil society. I hope that answers the reply from the request from Chile. And Madam Chair, just a very quick clarification. I said we got a notification from the mission of Colombia. We got it from Colombia, but it's in fact a delegate from Brazil. So sorry about that, and thank you very much to Colombia and especially to Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, SG. We now recognize the delegation of St. Lucia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assistant Secretary General Delegations, good morning all. As a point of clarification with respect to the schedule for the General Assembly, we noted on Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon from 1 to 3:30, we have the private dialogue of heads of delegation with the Secretary General and Assistant Secretary General. And then on Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., we have the dialogue of heads. It may have been explained previously, and I do seek your indulgence in again clarifying the difference between the two, or if the one is a continuation of the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the delegation of St. Lucia. We now turn over to you, SG.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In all General Assemblies, we have two types of what we denominate as dialogues. The dialogue of heads, which is in fact in the plenary session, where the heads take the floor and present their principal intervention for the General Assembly. That is called the dialogue of heads. And then we have the private dialogue. The private dialogue is a special space allocated where the heads of delegation plus one have a private conversation away from everybody else. When we are generally located in a conference room in one of our member states, this is pretty easy to achieve, because what we do is head of delegation plus one more go into a space, we lock the door, and we ensure that they have the conditions for a private conversation. This time, everything is being done virtually. It is still a private conversation among heads, just bearing in mind that we don't have control over who else is viewing or listening, because if a certain delegation has 2 people connected, but one of them in the room has 10 other people listening, we cannot control that. So I just want to point that out. So specifically in reply to St. Lucia, the dialogue of heads is in the plenary, and the private dialogue is this other room where we will have a private conversation to the extent that that may be possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, SG. I believe the delegation of St. Lucia would wish to have a further comment. St. Lucia, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Assistant Secretary General, for the clarification. So just so that I am clear on this, the dialogue of heads is within the plenary, but it's really not classified as a 3rd or 4th plenary session, correct? But it is still part of the plenary.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
We thank the delegation of St. Lucia, and we thank the ASG for the clarifications. There be no further requests for the floor. We are going to finish today's meeting early. I believe what was on the agenda is that we'll break at 12 to come back at 1:30 and expect it to go until 5:30. I thank all member states for really participating in a timely way today so that we are able to finish the entire agenda 12. And I want to use this opportunity to really support the ASG's call for all delegations to probably use this time to finalize the arrangements that are necessary for your delegations to be presented, so that Secretariat will have enough time to finish their planning for next week, General Assembly. So I want to again support the call from the ASG and really urge our delegations to use this time, the member states to use this time to finalize the delegations and other outstanding requests from the Secretariat. I thank you all for your participation today, and do have a very good rest of day and weekend, and we gather again on Monday. Thank you.